Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Sound Podcast with your host Christine Matthias.
It's because the labels are gone. You know, there's not a lot of labels. It's the Wild West out there, and like every artist has a shot. So I think San Diego rap is super open, collaborate, and the creative energy is real strong. It's one of the best seasons I've seen in a long time for the music.
Hello and welcome to episode number 12 of the Sunshine Sound Podcast. In this one, I interviewed Parker Edison and Nate Hubbard. They are 2/3 of the San Diego band, the Parker Meridien. So they are a live hip-hop band, so that means they have a real drummer and a real bass player, and sometimes they play with other live instruments during their performances, but they also even some samples like you might expect from other hip-hop acts. So the results is kind of beyond a particular genre, and we'll talk about the issues with having to put genres on your music. And you'll kind of have to come to your own conclusions about how you want to label their music after you hear it. But there's definitely elements of funk and trap and psychedelic and even experimental music. It's very cool stuff. So in this interview, we'll chat about things like what it was like to compose and rearrange those tracks. So they definitely do a lot of rearranging of their music, adding in new instrumentation, taking out instrumentation. So it's like every time you see this band live, it might sound a little bit different. And we'll talk about other things like the San Diego hip-hop scene, how collaborative and creative it really is right now. And, of course, we'll talk about tambourines and their stance on that issue. And we'll have a chance to listen to a few tracks off of their album, Fists Like Gotti. So this is a pretty fun one, and I hope you enjoy. So today in the studio, I have Parker Edison and Nate Hubbard of Parker Meridien. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Sure. How you guys doing?
I'm good.
Yeah. So tell me about Parker Meridien. Like what? How do you describe this project?
There's a word for it right now. Let's call it art rap right now. Let's call it art rap.
Cool.
Yeah, it's in that kind of like weird space between live band and hip hop. Like normally when you see a hip hop performance, it's like DJ, MC, and then also when you see a live band, there's sort of a different expectation. So we're kind of in the middle of that.
Yeah. So what does your setup look like?
It's 3 usually. So Nate's doing percussions, drum, and John Reeder is doing our bass. Uh-huh. And then sometimes we have Sharon Taylor. Recently, we just got her in there. She's doing cello.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then Nate's cueing backing samples. And so it's real small, but it sounds real big.
Cool. So you're doing percussion and doing the samples?
Yeah, so I'm playing drum kit. So it looks like a band. There's an electric bass player and there's a drum kit, and we get kind of loud and noisy and stuff. We've been doing a few things recently where we're doing all acoustic, where I'm playing like hand drums. That's with Sharon, so she's playing cello. So it's kind of more of like the 90s unplugged vibe or something.
Very cool. So how do you switch back and forth on different songs, doing like samples and drum kit, or like what?
No, there's samples on every song.
Okay.
The idea.
So how do you do all that?
Just with with phone. Right now, I'm using a phone to trigger some of the samples.
Cool.
So the idea was just to keep it as small as possible, because I run a lot of bands that have I have a band that has over 20 people in it.
Whoa,
and it's impossible.
What?
It's impossible to get people together, right?
Yeah.
So keeping it as small as possible. So, I mean, in a perfect world, we would have like a keyboard player and one person just doing like sound samples, like triggering samples. And then we would have probably 3 background vocals and maybe a brass section, or in the perfect world, but that's just not going to happen. So for us right now, the idea was just to keep it as small as possible. So I kind of function as like drummer and a DJ, not in the sense of like scratching, but in the sense of like setting up the tunes, having the samples ready, setting the pace of the show and things like that.
Sure, gotcha. And then so how does the songwriting process work then?
It's weird.
Is it?
It's very strangely, but very organically, where whoever has an idea, usually Nate has an idea and he'll pitch something that's very raw, and I do the same. And sometimes it's as raw as not even having words, or it's not a complete instrumental, or it's just super raw, and you pitch that enough so it's an idea you can communicate, and it just kind of snowballs. And then each of us, John Reeder adds his bass to it, and snowballs.
So it's very collaborative, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think we've all been trying to keep it open enough to just bring enough of something to get it started, and then start sort of like a conversation about what it could be. I drive around a lot, like I do a lot of theater shows and a lot of shows where I'm out late at night, so I always end up like humming to myself. I have like on my phone, I just have a bunch of like stupid demos, like
right,
and like some hook comes to me or something. So I'll just do like a rough little demo with a beat and like a hook, or a beat and something, just kind of like a vibe to start off with. It's like, we could maybe start here, and then it usually develops.
Gotcha. Yeah, you don't often hear about music starting with the drummer, so that's interesting.
Yeah, well, I have a sort of a history of being a composer. In this situation, I'm trying to not do the thing where I'd like, here's my completely finished song, let's try this. Because this started where Parker asked me to do some arrangements of some pieces that he had already done. So it was already like, he's like, well, here's this, but change it and do something different with it. So that was kind of the starting point. And then, so from that, there's been like sort of a give and take. I don't like that. Gotcha. Okay, let's go in that direction. No, let's shy away from that, or like, let's go further with that. That's so that's kind of the it started from the ground zero as sort of a give and take.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so was it like kind of the two of you that started then?
Yeah, and then you added Harley Maxino on bass.
Yeah, we've used a couple different bass players. John Reeder's the one that's kind of stuck the longest. But the idea from the beginning was, I think there was talk early on, like maybe instead of a bass player, a keyboard player, like drums, keyboard, and MC. But I think the original idea was to keep it very small, just a trio, and start from there.
And did you want it to do kind of this, because it's kind of like an experimental kind of arty sound, I would say. Like, was that the plan from the beginning?
I don't think so. I wanted, and I'd love to hear what Nate says separately, but I wanted it to be a rap record that was translated through live instrumentation, because it started off as these boom bap sounds that are synthetic. So it's that raw jaggedness. And then Nate was doing these rearrangements, and those compositions were keeping the same aesthetic. That's still, so that to me is what it is. I'm not sure what
yeah, I don't going. I mean, I think we're both known as being a little wacky, like respectively in whatever world we were living in. But I mean, when it started, it was, in general, it was just thought of as a rap. It's going to be a rap project. Clearly, like I was saying, the difference between having a DJ playing beats and having a drummer and having a live band changes things. Because with hip hop, people are used to hearing, the quantized beats and hearing the same sample. So you hear every time the kick drum sounds, it's the exact same sound. And as a human being, every time you hit a drum, it's going to sound maybe not completely different, but it's going to sound just a little bit different. So it changes how people perceive that. You hear that consistency of those samples, and it's a different thing. Like if you go to I like as a drummer, I notice this. You go to like a rock concert, and people like they perceive the rhythm differently than if you go to a hip hop show.
Yeah.
There's a different thing, and there's something about the, like you're saying, the jaggedness, the like. So there's sort of an unrelentingness to like these samples just continuing on and never moving, and the time never fluctuates. You know, there's none of those human things. There's a little bit of like if you go back in the history of hip hop. You know, there's like the early Sugar Hill Gang that was all live instrumentation.
Right.
You know, all the way up to the Roots, and there's different people that have live bands. A lot of people are touring with live bands, whether it's the Jizza or Snoop or whatever. Tons of people are doing that because there is something more exciting when you have a bunch of people on stage and you can have a show rather than just watching a guy with a DJ, which can be fun too. I mean, like Run the Jewels is still doing that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that have realized, like, oh yeah, if we put a drummer in here and a couple guitar players, like it's going to be more interesting.
Yeah,
so it's
definitely.
interesting, like what our perception of it is, and then you talk to people and they're like, yeah, it's kind of like this and it's kind of like that. You know, it's kind of a different.
Yeah, sometimes you have to leave it up to the critics to kind of put a genre on your music.
Yeah,
Everyone will, like
Yeah.
a different one.
Yeah. And so when you're working, because if you're using samples and you're playing live drums, is it tricky to get that all timed up?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the thing. I think we've tried to keep it pretty fairly sparse.
Okay,
Like
gotcha.
there's not like a. I mean, my favorite stuff is the Bomb Squad. That's sort of that was sort of my intro to hip hop when I was 12 or something, was Public Enemy. So that like super dense, like multiple layers of sound constantly happening and stuff. So and if you hear some of my other stuff I do have huge bands with all these things. So I sort of gravitate towards these thicker textures. But we've been trying to like keep it much more sparse and not worry about like, it doesn't have to have 6 things going on simultaneously at all times, you know?
Yeah, gotcha. And so go ahead, Parker.
I was just saying, I was agreeing.
Nice.
It's slimming down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good deal. So how did you two meet each other?
We met, I think we met a few different times. The first time I moved to Arizona in 2011. Maybe. Wait, no, maybe I moved back in 2011. 2009. Anyway, so we moved. My wife got a job out there. We moved out there for a few years, and I came back, and one of the things I wanted to do was just work with people, because I grew up here, and I had spent many years playing music with people, but there was a lot of people in town that I'd never gotten a chance to play with. And I moved back, and I said, well, I need to play with why haven't I played with this person or whatever, you know? So I started reaching out to people, and Jack was one of the people I reached out to. I think we officially met on stage at $7,000. I said, hey, I've got this gig. You know, I don't know what you're doing, but if you're interested, come down and sit in. And he literally like walked up out of the audience and like freestyled on a couple things.
Oh, cool.
So that was like a nice introduction.
Yeah. And then
Nice.
we shot a video after that, and then we did a show after that, and then it started rolling.
Yeah.
Nice. And so was this started rolling on this project, or was this a different project? Did you work on different projects
First thing
before
was
this
the
one?
video.
Yeah, we had I had a song called Ape Food that I did with Odessa Kane and Piff PCH. And we were going to shoot a video. I was checking out these I'd been brought to a live performance. Nate was doing these guerrilla performances at SDSU in the garages. And it was real guerrilla. They were almost like flash mobs. Like everyone would just know to show up. He would do these elaborate, like abstract drum presentations.
Whoa.
And then it would just break down and kind of disperse like in an hour and a half. But there's no flyers or nothing. It was just... I thought that was real hip hop.
Yeah, that's real cool.
Yeah, so I was like,
You came to the one where people actually showed up too. The ones where there was nobody there.
this one was sick. Everyone was sitting and everyone's all intent. But so I was like, yo, can we do that for this song that I have? And we did it. We shot the video, and it's called Ape Food. It's still online, YouTube. And then we started working on. Maybe we started doing the Parker Meridien EP, and then we did Tonight in San Diego.
Yeah.
And did a live performance, and that got a good reaction. And then we started doing live performances, and those started having kind of a buzz of their own. And
Nice.
I think
Yeah.
that's what we're doing now is more of the live performance, like 60% live performance. And the CD just kind of documents what we're doing on stage. Yeah.
Yeah, good. So how do you go about generating buzz? Like what? This is a question
That is
that
the
comes
universal
up
question,
on
isn't it?
every podcast.
Like nobody knows. I mean, for us, we just literally Jack called me and said, "Hey, I've got this gig. Can we put together a little bit of music for this thing?" That's literally like he was saying. We had this Tonight in San Diego gig. So that was literally the starting point. Was like, okay, well, we have a performance in a month, and let's put this music together. And we figured out like, I think we did Some Way, and we did one cover, one of the tunes from the thing, and I started throwing, pretty naturally, I started throwing hooks at him. So it was kind of organic, and the same thing with the gigs. We just started doing gigs. We did Tonight in San Diego, and then we did, I forget, I'd have to look at the thing, what the next thing was, but it just kind of naturally started rolling, and people started asking us to do these different events, and from there it just kind of built up.
Nice. How did you get Tonight in San Diego? Like, how did that come about?
I'm part of the film consortium. I do I was the music conduit for the film consortium. Shout out Jody Silly. And Fale Lewis is a part of that. And Fale, I think he might have reached out. And I was on there before. I think I was on there before for something. And it just worked out. It worked out, and they gave us a shot. And we just happened to have this project going. And so it worked.
So you kind of got to like launch this project on that, it sounds like.
Yeah. We did a little
cool.
like fake, I think the night before we did a little fake performance where we played through it.
At the Whistle Stop?
At
Was
the
that
Whistle Stop,
Oh,
yeah.
cool.
As part of the
Nice.
film thing, we did like a little like, and here's a little bit of music for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, that was a nice starting point.
Which was, and on a weird thing is, Tonight in San Diego at that time was going to get picked up by like the CW.
Oh,
Yeah, so they were shooting, these were basically like demos. So they were shooting them in the format of a late night show to be shown in San Diego. And so it had like this very, very formal and official feel to it. So now when you watch the video, the short 6-minute clip of the video, it looks very much like the show and like what it was. So it's dope. It's dope.
Yeah. So I guess it didn't happen though with the CW, huh?
I think maybe it wasn't the CW, whichever
Or
one just
whatever network
folded.
it was.
Yeah, it was the one that just like Channel 6,
I
whichever
see.
one just recently folded.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they're still going. The Tonight in San Diego is still going.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's cool.
I'm actually looking at the Instagram right now at the gigs. Yeah, the first couple things we did was Tonight in San Diego, and then we did Hip Hop versus Punk Rock, which is at Tower Bar.
Oh,
It's like a monthly
that sounds
series
cool.
that
Nice.
that Mr. Henshaw and Stunt Double and those guys run.
Oh, cool.
So that was fun, and then
It becomes like basically like two shows a month for like almost, let's say, 18 months. And we're just doing show after show. And so it becomes this thing where like the songs are being written in the live format. And so after you do them, you sharpen them with the crowd. And the crowd doesn't like that. So you shave it back. Or so you kind of have like these.
Or you don't like it. There was a lot of stuff where we were like, nah, we need to stretch that out, or we need to. Yeah, this was definitely not like. There's a lot of projects, where like people get together and write a record and record the record and put it out, and the first gig is like the CD release. This was definitely not that. Like, in fact, when we started recording, we're talking about a recording. I said, okay, but anything we put on this, we have to have played live.
Yes, yeah.
When's the release? Is it like a year and a half?
The
to
release
the first?
was actually 2 years, almost to the date from the first gig. So there was, 24 months of us doing gigs and sort of like working on this, playing this stuff in different situations and seeing what worked.
Yeah, that definitely takes some confidence and some vulnerability to kind of work out the songs on stage in front of people. Like, what was that like?
I think it's pretty normal. I think the songs change a lot when you play them live. I've been in several projects where we would spend a bunch of time working on new material, and then we'd find like a year later that we were playing it way better live. Because you actually put in the time and stuff. So it definitely does, like, there's a different thing of like I don't know, this is really weird, but there's this video, I really don't like this band, but there's a video of Journey playing one of their famous songs. I forget which one it is, but it's like, there's a video of them playing it for the first time, and they nail it. It's not like this is like a workshop or anything, you know? Like, they nail it. It sounds like what ended up on the record. So it's really interesting, and clearly that's the 70s, and it's a different time, but it's interesting to look back on these bands and how you, when you have a band, like, how do you present material? How do you, like, do you spend a bunch of time? Do you, like, work on it and change it over time? Even now we're doing this, like, we've been playing some of these tunes for, like, over 2 years. And, like, do we change this? Do we stop playing them? Like, which songs, like, just get kind of pushed out of the set at some point?
Right.
Those are all, like, interesting questions. I don't really have the answers, but we're kind of trying to figure that out of, like, okay, well, this makes sense. There was, when we started we did that video for Ape Food, and then that was part of the set for...
At like 8 months at least.
No, longer than that. It was like 2 years. There was finally a point where I said, like, yeah, maybe we don't need to play that anymore.
Right.
And we haven't played it since.
No, it's been a minute.
It's been out of the set. So there's been a couple tunes where we're just like, okay, well, maybe we don't need to. I mean, I thought for a long time that was a really nice starting point, because that was our starting point. And that was how the set would start. We'd play Ape Food.
Right.
Every set?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of like, I mean, I don't know if people realize, like, oh, yeah, this was the first thing they did together or whatever, you know. But it was like, it kind of set the stage for, like, in multiple different meanings of that word. Or that phrase.
Yeah, it's hard to know when to move on from a song, because the audience still might be into it, but
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think about these bands that have, you know, like one-hit wonders, and they have to keep playing that song 20 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Better know. You, Skilo, better do I Wish. Like,
Right.
that's we came for Freebird. We came here for Freebird.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember seeing Ani DeFranco in the 90s, and she was like, yeah, we were talking about what to play, and everybody starts screaming, play this, play, you know, like everybody wanted to hear their song, and she's like, yeah, I kind of moved on from that, which I thought was really amazing, because like, clearly there's people screaming their guts out wanting to hear this one song, and she's like, yeah, I'm not in that space anymore. I don't play that song anymore.
Yeah, sure.
Most Def said that too. When he was out here, he said, but he was like, I'm not a jukebox. And I thought that was dope, because he's like, I'm a person.
Right.
And he was like, I'm feeling magical. You know what I mean? Like, come with me. And, you know, I guess when you play that big, that much, like you get tired of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if the crowd was asking for that, what was the name of the song you say you don't play anymore?
Ape Food.
Would you play it now?
Maybe. We're not really at that point. Like,
Yeah.
I've seen, like, we opened for Black Milk, and there were people in the audience, like, literally going up to him between songs being like, can you play this? Like, people don't know our material that well.
Okay.
So we definitely,
Sure.
the 40 Foot Tall seems to get, like, people seem to know that song.
And 7 on the Mookie, I was with DJ Rube last night, and he played it, and he was like, man, I love this song.
Everybody loves that song.
Hey, dude, so some of it gets traction, but I think, and this is a weird thing, but I think
Did you
like,
tell him that
that
you
I hated,
didn't want to put it on the
yeah,
record?
Yeah, I did. I was just gonna say, I'm like, yeah, I hated that song. We did it, and that's that thing where he was like, yo, we're gonna try everything. We're gonna see how it goes. We'll record it, see what it is. We gave it a run, and it works. But I told him, yeah, I was like, I voted against that bad boy. Yeah.
Oh, funny. All right, so let's take a break here and listen to one of those tracks from that album that you sent me. Let's see, you sent me a couple. Let's take a break and listen to New River.
rocking the Caesar, that Holly Robinson peak, get it from Jump Street. This is that kiss of death, the girls that gamble cigarettes, those whodunits she'll never guess. Maltese Falcon over moon. River. Hey. For my cats that watch Criterion, the focus ain't criteria. My Cisco's and my Ebits, anywhere that there's a TV on the moon. See, I'm from a generation that really didn't have a lot of I'm flashing back but backwards. Smoking gun detective flicks, black and whites and cigarettes. Smoke 'em if you got 'em, kids. This is Moon Rivers. But this is that Mr. Ed, the girls, the gams, and cigarettes. Those who done it, you'll never guess. Smoke 'em if you got 'em, kids. Moon River. Hey. For my cats that watch Criterion, the focus say criteria. My sis goes in my ebits anywhere that there's a TV on. Moon. And as previously mentioned, I took the time to write you a list of some of my favorite, most romantic films. Number 10, let's say Goonies. Everything don't gotta be love, stuff to be romantic. She's Gotta Have It by Spike Lee. The Professional, Monster, Baby Boy, that's one of my favorites. Leonardo DiCaprio's Romeo and Juliet, Mo Better Blues, Cold Mountain, Tampopo, and of course the number one spot is Sid and Nancy, Sid and Nancy, Sid and Nancy.
And we're back. That's a really cool track. So tell me about that. I did listen to it before, I'll have you know, even though we didn't listen to it now. I love the line, digital role models. That's cool.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yay. That's one of the original songs. We had like 3 songs, maybe 4 songs that start off as rap songs, and Nate got them and he rearranged them, did new compositions to them, and then I think 3 of them made the record, and that's one of them. And it's what?
Oh, I don't know. I was I was trying to think about the whole genesis. I have to say that song's interesting because I didn't. This is gonna sound weird, but I didn't take it as seriously. I remember we were working on a couple tunes early on, and there was another tune that I thought was sort of the focal point of the set. And I remember Parker saying, no, that needs to be shorter because the important one is this River. And I was like, oh, okay. So that was kind of interesting, and it's gone through a couple different revisions to like change not so much the arrangement, just the texture of it to kind of get it. I wanted it to be sort of glass-like. There's a certain kind of like shimmeringness that needs to happen to it, I feel like, to make it work.
Sure.
It
Yeah.
is bonkers right now. Like, and let me just shamelessly plug it. Come watch us do it at Catapult Books in South Park on Sunday. We're going to shoot a demo to submit to NPR's Tiny Desk, and
Oh, cool.
we got Sharon Taylor on the cello. And you, by adding that to it, it does bring this kind of fragility to it. It's insane. It's insane the way it sounds.
It's
now.
interesting to really, we've been doing these sets with Sharon where we're really stripped down. I'm playing these little hand drums and like a little bit of glockenspiel, and John's playing acoustic bass and cello and stuff. And Jack's playing a little bit of samples from a phone, but like there's not the full like, Parker Meridian's kind of this like, bam, like when we play it's loud and it's a little noisy and stuff. So there's like an interesting, like, sort of stripped down, you really see some of the little subtleties that maybe weren't obvious or something like that.
Interesting. So what is it like to kind of strip down a song like that? Is that process difficult? Do you basically have to like rewrite the arrangement, or like what's that like?
Not so much. I mean, most of these songs, there's a beat, there's a bass line, there's some sort of melodic thing on top. Most of the stuff that we use is like Fender Rhodes, Wurlitzer kind of sample, like electric piano samples, and nothing too thick, like sometimes just a little chord or like a fairly simple thing. And then a couple different little sound samples. That's basically, if you were to strip down all of our songs, you could like break it down into those things.
Yeah.
There's no strings on anything. There's no organ. There's not a lot of percussion. So it's really just about figuring out what's the most important thing of each of those. I mean, if you listen to 7 on the Mookie on the record, there's like this fake sort of marching band we did where there's a bunch of drums. And that's not, when we play it stripped down, that's not there. But it still works without that. I think one of my goals was that like if there's any melodic material, if there's something to be sung, or if there's a hook, it's got to be really top quality. Like really strong melodic material, really strong hook where you can like immediately like latch onto it,
Sure.
So I think that works, and I think stripping it down really shows if those things really are strong, because it's like if you strip it down, you're like, yeah, that's not as good as I thought it was, because there's all these extra samples. Like you realize, like, okay, it wasn't as good as we thought it was.
Right. It's just from what I'm hearing and how you talk about your music, it sounds like it's kind of a really fluid process. It's not like this is a song and this is what it is. It's like it's open up to all these different kinds of interpretations.
Sure.
But somehow do you feel like you need to work to kind of maintain the essence of the song throughout that?
I mean, honestly, I think the essence is Parker.
Yeah. So that stays the same. Would you say, like, do you change your words at all when you perform out, or are there any kind of changes that happen?
I do. And I almost think instead of having the album, like the album isn't where some people, they listen to the album over and over and they're like, I bought the album here and this is where I played it at. And I don't think we have that. I think we have like these live performances. So people, they get the shaping of the song live. Like people come and they watch the show like six, 7 times over like a year and a half. And so they see like the changing of the songs there. So I kind of feel like they're part of it. Like that's the performance art is instead of the CD or instead of the Bandcamp, you're getting the live versions of it like they used to for Motown or something. Like So
yeah.
I think it doesn't.
But I think there are like the overall flow of the lyrics and the sort of content behind it, the hook, and then maybe if there's some sort of melodic thing like like the piano part on River or the little vocal melody on 7 on the Mookie or something like that. Each of those things, those are like, if you really wanted to strip it all the way down, those would be the things. I think that's what you do, like when you strip it down, you have to realize like, okay, what's the most important part?
Right, gotcha.
Like, does it need that weird, I can't even admit what the
The
sample
marching
is.
band. Like
Yeah.
you need the marching band.
Yeah, it's cool, but it's like you can do it without and it still works. There's a couple like weird little FM radio samples in the middle of 40 Foot Tall that I wouldn't tell you whose band it is because we probably sued. If those things don't happen, it's still gonna work out, you know. So like you really make those things. Like we've been doing these acoustic versions. We're doing 40 Foot Tall, and Sharon is literally playing the guitar part, and there's a bunch of little radio samples, and I put together a part where she can play both of those parts at the thing. So it's really interesting to like, she's been kind of a secret weapon for this. We've been putting together this acoustic thing just to cover a couple performances recently. And we were laughing in rehearsal because I was like, yeah, sorry. So this tune, you're playing the piano part. The next tune, you're actually like a guitar player. And the song after that, you're playing all the vocal parts.
Oh, wow.
You know, like she like can like make that all happen. Cello works in that kind of range where it can cover all those different things.
Very cool. So yeah,
He writes in like you got a 50-person piece, right? The Skeleton Key is 50 people.
that's your other band.
There's 50 people on the. I don't think there's one tune that has all 50 of them, but there were 50 people on the last record. Yeah.
So like even when we have a composition that's written for 4, I think somewhere in his mind it still has the space for 25, so we can add all these other pieces in there. Those are options. They're like these invisible options, so it can spread out or tighten up to fit these different different venues and different events. I think that's like something else to it.
Sure. Yeah, I think you take for granted that you have a mind that can understand that, but I don't think all musicians can do that so easily.
No.
I mean, it's just orchestration. I don't think it's that. What? I don't think it's. I mean, like if you've got there's a guitar over there. If you take you're playing a guitar part, you can take that and put it on the keyboard. It's going to sound totally different. You double that with vibraphone, it's going to sound totally different. You play it on bassoon or whatever, that's going to change those things. And then by changing all those things, of course, gives you different things of, you could double it or multiply it or harmonize it. There's all sorts of different things. So, yeah, it's an interesting process. Just to figure out what that is. And also, like we were saying, like keep it simple, like really strip it down and, it doesn't need all these keyboard parts. Right. I don't need to layer in 20 guitar parts. Sure. Whatever that is.
Yeah. Good deal. Okay, so on that note, let's take a break and listen to another one of the tracks you sent me. What was it called? I wrote it down. Oh, Long Distance Runner.
Oh, shit.
Good deal. All right, let's take a quick break.
Whoa.
What are you doing?
I'm in the laundry room trying to figure out the security system.
I can't talk right now, though.
Right, why'd you call then?
Because you told me to call you.
When?
Look, before I left. I'll call you back.
Bounce. 27 blunts. Feel like I've been sitting here for months. I think it's probably only been a minute, but finally this party's heating up. Oh man, but that hot-blooded vodka could make all the Hennessy sweet. And what starts off at a concert ends at the Embassy Suites. Oh man, Ohio to Tokyo, I'm somewhere out in Idaho, and I don't know the name. All I know is I got a chick. I keep my dick in my dicky so broads can't fuck with me, and I leave before the party is through. I'm not playing, let's bounce and let's go. Bounce. Double cups. I think I've seen a couple of my exes walking in the door when we pulled off. Cause I'm hip to how that hot-blooded vodka could change your whole life in a blink. And what starts off at a concert could end at the Embassy Suites. Oh man, Ohio to Tokyo, I'm lost way out in Idaho, and I don't know the name. All I know is I got a chick. I keep my dick in my dicky so bras don't f with me, and I go before the party is through. I'm not playing, let's bounce and let's go. Bounce, man. Bounce, bounce, bounce. Hey, bounce.
Ohio to Tokyo.
Girls all mad.
When summer out in Idaho.
Somewhere out in Idaho.
I'm walking in the door.
I'm gonna have to call her back.
When summer out in Idaho.
I'm gonna service.
Ohio to Tokyo.
Phones all bugging.
When summer out in Idaho.
I'm walking in the door.
When summer out in Idaho. Ohio to Tokyo. When summer out in Idaho. And I don't know the name, all I know is I got a chick. Ohio to Tokyo. When summer out in Idaho.
And I don't know the name, all I know is I got a chick.
Ohio to Tokyo.
Yeah,
When summer
song's
out in
called Run
Idaho.
Rabbit. Yeah,
Ohio to Tokyo.
I can't be playing with you.
When summer out in Idaho.
My chick is at home.
Ohio to Tokyo.
I gotta go. I gotta go. I gotta go.
Ohio to Tokyo. When summer out in Idaho.
I gotta go. Yeah, I gotta go. I gotta go. Running and running and running and running. I'm running and running and running and running. Running and 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 running.
Okay, we're back.
And we're back.
I like him.
Fast version. So, yeah, tell me about that one.
Long distance runner was
Yeah.
That's the first hook that we wrote together. I sent him half the hook, and I said, finish this, like via text. And I sent him Long Distance Runner, and he wrote Run Rabbit Run. That's what it was.
Nice.
Yay. Did you already have the instruments already in there?
I wrote the bass line. I just had the hook, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And then once you wrote it back, it made sense, and I put the bass line to it. We brought it to rehearsal and started playing it. And then Jack started doing this like kind of half song that Ohio to Tokyo, I'm lost somewhere. Like, and I realized like, okay, so when we did a demo of it, and I took that, and those vocals, the high vocals that sound like a female, are actually him pitch shifted up an octave and auto-tuned.
Oh, wow.
So you hear all these things that are like, so we worked on it for a while. I'm not sure how we got to that slower.
I think I heard it when we did it a couple times, like around the place, and I was like, yo, if we did, I think I saw somebody who slowed it down, like on some trap stuff, or maybe we were talking about trap, you know what I mean? And it was the influence of trap music though, and being like, yo, if this was a trap groove right here, it'd be crazy. Yeah. And then we got that in there.
That's one of the interesting ones, because like it's very rare in hip hop where you have a tempo shift.
Yeah.
Like 40 Foot Tall, we go from like the tempo to halftime, which is fairly normal. You have that happen a lot, especially in trap music or in like dubstep or things like that, where you'll just flip it up or it'll double. But to actually have like a completely different tempo that's, 15, 10, 20 clicks away was kind of interesting. Because we were talking about, I think we did try it in halftime, the end. Yeah. And then we realized like, oh, it doesn't work. We should just slow it down a bit. Because it kind of gets immediately into that head nodding thing. So yeah, it's an interesting track. It's kind of there's a few of them that kind of have this fairly intense forward motion. I think that's kind of what especially live, there's a certain thing that the band's become known for, and that's some of that 40 Foot Tall, Long Distance Runner, thing like that.
Yeah. So do you think does trap have an influence in any of your other songs, or do you feel like just this one?
No.
Yeah.
No, it's in there.
Yeah.
It's in there. There's some trap in a Firewall. There's a verse where we're hitting kind of a cadence of the sitting center stage like a centerfold, my style's cold like a ceiling fan, and that's kind of the chop that you catch in trap.
Yeah,
long distance.
I honestly I don't really listen to much trap, and I my whole thing I grew up in the late 80s 90s, so I came from like Public Enemy and Trap Called Quest and Poor Righteous Teachers and things like that, and then in the mid 90s with Goody Mob, and so when I hear trap I just hear Dirty South, early Dirty South, 3-6 Mafia and Goody Mob and things like that. So the whole in terms of production, not so much in terms of flow, but in terms of production of the crazy 30-second note hi-hats and stuff like that, that hasn't been a huge influence. I've actually been listening to it more because we've been kind of hinting at it, and I'm like, oh shit, I need to figure out what the fuck I'm doing, because I'm I don't listen to that shit enough. But there is kind of that slower tempo. This is totally drummer stuff. 16 notes with double time hi-hat stuff. A lot of that stuff comes out of that late 90s. So when I play, for me, that's where I'm coming from. And then I've been trying to figure out okay, what else? What are these other? What happened when T.I. or whoever took it and did something with it? What are those sounds?
And part of it is that's the organic side of it is because we were in Mexicali, we were doing a show and we were playing 3-6 Mafia for I don't know, 6 hours. We were just but not even listening to all of it. It's just playing in the background. So it kind of you kind of get in the movement of it. And I think there's groups where you don't have that type of leeway, where people don't say, okay, we'll just try it in halftime and see if it works. And then when it does, you keep moving in that direction. So it's real organic, whatever we're naturally talking about in real life kind of makes its way into the art.
Right. So you're not necessarily intentionally being
we need to write a trap song.
Exactly.
Right.
Where's the drop? We need a drop for this one.
Not at all.
Yeah, there's none of I think personally I this goes beyond this conversation, but I don't really like the idea of genre at all. So when people say oh, I'm into trap or I'm into trance, I remember having this conversation with this guy many years ago, and he said, I just listen to trance music. I was okay, that's really interesting. Okay. So, but when you put those things on it, I see, there's a long history of hip hop, and it's been through different stylistic changes, and I don't see any reason why we can't reference a lot of those. without being specifically one thing. I mean, we're definitely not a trap band. I don't think we're like, whatever term you want to put on that, I don't think we're any of those. We're not a backpacker band. We're not like this. We're not that. We're not a gang, like gangster rap. You know, we're not like whatever phrase it is that people use.
Yeah.
It's everything. Like that's even to like you check out New River and there's these references of like TV. So it's like we're pulling from TV. We're pulling from movie culture. We're pulling from, you know, like Primus bass lines from trap. Like there isn't an off limit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, organs and twinkly synthesizers and tambourines. Those are the limits.
Those are no tambourines.
No tambourines.
No tambourines.
Tambourine-free band.
I do kind of. I guess we do have a couple of things that I try and stay away from.
Could we call this No Tambourines? This episode be No Tambourines.
That should be what this.
Yeah.
What do you got against tambourines? That could be.
No, tambourines are good. No, actually, we've been doing a version of "Looking Out the Front Door" by Main Source.
Yeah.
And we have a ton of tambourine on that track. So
No, we don't. We don't have no tambourine on that song.
But originally,
None.
that was one of the. When I do a project, I like to the term parameters is maybe overused, but like to have certain ideas of like just to set up a general kind of like playing field.
Sure.
So like, okay, you know, and give it a little bit of an identity. If you listen to the record, like the drum sounds change a little bit, but in general, like if it's a keyboard sound, it's pretty much all, like I was saying, Fender Rhodes or Wurlitzer sounds. There's a little bit of synthesizer, but it's very subtle. The bass all has a very similar sound. So I wanted it to be cohesive in that sense, but there's things that match up where it doesn't sound like a different producer did each track.
That makes sense, especially if you're pulling from so many different genres to have something that kind of holds it all together. Right?
Yeah, and little subtle things can do that. Like just, you know, having a list of like, okay, here's the things that do work, and then here's the things we're going to kind of stay away from. Maybe we can hint at, there is a little bit of tambourine, but...
There's no tambourine in the song. Not going to admit to it.
So, switching gears a little bit, I'm curious what your opinion is of the hip-hop scene in San Diego generally, because I'm really not in that scene, so I don't know what it's like. What is it like?
You just had MC Flo on here.
That's true. She's great. Yeah.
You're tapping in.
I'm trying.
It's because the labels are gone. You know, there's not a lot of labels. It's the Wild West out there, and like every artist has a shot. So I think San Diego rap is super, super open and collaborating, and the creative energy is real strong. It's one of the best seasons I've seen in a long time for the music. Yeah.
Yeah, right now I think there's a lot of interesting stuff. I think if you are an outsider and you're looking at it, there's a lot of different ways to get into it, and there's a lot of people doing very different stuff. You know, you've got like Big June and you've got MC Flo. I mean, talk about like very different people, and you've got Orko and you've got Mitchie Slick, and there's a ton of people doing really interesting work that's very varied. So there's a ton of interesting things. It is true there's a lot of, I think in general, people write off local music. Like people want to listen to stuff that's on the radio, or they listen to stuff that's maybe presented to them in an easy way. And they're not really like going out and of course there's always this like, well, he's from the same town I'm from, how can he be any good? You know, like that's true in general of whatever you're talking about, rock, rap, jazz, whatever. So I think there's a lot of really good stuff happening.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's a supportive community, though. So that's always good to hear. Yeah.
I think it's more so. This is probably the most it's ever been. Like in the past, it was, but it's becoming more progressive. I mean, everyone's pulling from these different elements. Like there are these different artists that are becoming. They exhibit more musicality, like Leon Saint Heron or Real J Wallace are being more musical, and then. Even like gangster rap, not gangster rap, but you get like the harder stuff like Rob Stone. There's still like a musicality to that Chill Bill record that he had, which went platinum, which is a single that went platinum like last year. So like,
nice.
It runs the gamut. B-side Players in 3D is kind of like Latin, but still with the musicality, but you know, on a world music level, it has a lot of more influences there. So like, there's a lot of collabos, a lot of good creative stuff.
Nice. Yeah. Have you guys gone on any tours or taken this anywhere else?
We went to Mexicali once.
Okay. Yeah. How was that? What's the scene like there?
It's actually, there's an interesting little scene there. It was actually supposed to be part of a larger thing, and then a few other things fell through, so we ended up just going out there for a gig. That's actually like something we're working on right now, is getting out. We've mostly been focusing on playing in San Diego and just kind of like building up material and stuff. So I think one of the steps in the next year is like sort of build that. Clearly we're not going to go to Europe for 6 months or something, but we're like trying to build sort of just like boundaries.
Yeah.
Pushing our boundaries.
Sure.
How do we get to San Francisco? How do we get to LA? How do we get to Las Vegas? How do we get to Phoenix, Tucson, Ensenada, TJ?
Sure. Just expand from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good deal. Yeah. How do you feel like, I don't know if you've spent time in LA, I feel like the San Diego scene gets compared a lot to LA.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
We're still kind of like the little stepbrother.
Right.
I think that it seems like the people that have done the best have just, no offense to LA, but have just ignored LA.
Right.
Sure.
Not in the way of like not playing there, but like I think there's very different music down here than there is LA. There's always been this like, oh, you got to go to LA to make it, or you know, like people from LA will come down here and talk like they're slumming by playing in San Diego or something.
Yeah.
But I think there's very different, like the music in San Diego doesn't sound like the music in LA. I think it sounds very different, and I think that's a good thing to have, like a San Diego identity, whether we're talking about folk music or hip hop or anything. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's having a smaller city also promotes having a tighter community and more collaboration.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So do you guys have any shows coming up?
We have a hell of a lot of shows.
Yeah.
You guys stay busy. That's great.
Yeah, we're doing Sunday at...
Wait, you play Friday though.
Well, that's not
Oh,
us, though.
so you gotta say
I'm
you gotta
just
say
doing
the
one of my
dates
things.
because it's not gonna be
Okay.
aired right away.
May 20th, we're doing the Book Catapult. We're doing 1 p.m. We're doing an acoustic set that we're videotaping and recording.
Nice.
And then
So you're gonna like post that to YouTube or it's
yeah,
gonna be
that's the
available? Cool.
plan. And then we're doing. I'm sorry, I'm looking through all these dates. I'm going to Arizona. That's not us. We're playing Winston's for ALO's series. What is that? Hip Hop Social.
I believe so. On June.
And that's
June
June 7th. And then.
With Cause and Emphasize, by the way. Shout out them. We're playing.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool. I didn't see that. Who's on the bill yet?
I just heard that today.
And then we are playing with the Basics for their CD release, and that's going to be June 16th. That's down in Imperial Beach.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
They just got nominated for an SDMA this year and last year.
And then we're also doing June 21st at the Casbah for the Art Unites, which is a cool thing where they put on a situation where there's bands and there's also artists and different things like that.
Nice.
I think that's it for
Oh, that's great.
the
You
next
guys stay
month or so.
busy. Do you like to keep it that way?
Trying to, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
think it's always good to play.
Yeah. So if people want to find your music or find you guys, where can they find you?
Just Google. You can Google Parker Meridien. It's on Spotify, YouTube, iTunes. Yeah, it's everywhere.
Bandcamp, go buy a CD.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, guys, for coming by the studio. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. That was fun.
Thank you, and shout out John Reeder. He couldn't be here tonight, but he's the coolest cat out of us.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks again for listening to the Sunshine Sound Podcast. If you like what you heard, you can check out older episodes at sunshinesoundcenter.org. Feel free to give us a rating on iTunes or wherever you find your podcast, and that'll help with our visibility. You can also check out our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for updates on Sunshine Sound Center. And we also post updates of all the shows and music and other stuff that all the artists that come on this show are doing. And if you are an artist who's been on this show, definitely feel free to keep us in the loop, and we are happy to promote you. So if you have any other questions for me, or you have any guests to suggest, you can contact me at Christine with a C at sunshinesoundcenter.org. And one more thank you to Tommy Bobcat for always helping out with all the audio engineering. Really appreciate it. That's all I have for you today, but I'll talk to you again soon. Have a good one.